Welcome to Beyond Science Italy. In this stimulating video, Alberto Bonato from the YouTube channel of the same name explores the mysteries and contradictions surrounding the ancient Egyptian pyramids. Inspired by the book Giza, The Fall of Dogma, Alberto delves into unanswered questions and challenges the official narratives of Egyptology. Why were no mummies ever found inside the pyramids if they were meant to be tombs? How did the Egyptians create intricate alabaster artifacts with tools made of copper, stone, and wood? Join us as we raise these questions and more, encouraging viewers to think critically and seek knowledge beyond conventional explanations. We don't provide answers, as Alberto Bonato says, but we spark curiosity. This video is for those who have the courage to question the official theories. If you can stay attentive and open-minded, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this journey of exploration and inquiry together. This video is hard to make, but I just want to ask some questions, in light of a book I've read that has left me with many questions. Yes, because sometimes you don't need to have answers, you just need the opportunity to ask questions. And you don't need to be an expert to ask questions, you just need a functioning brain. You don't need to be an expert to notice contradictions in the official version, you just need a bit of logic. The book I mentioned is titled Giza, The Fall of Dogma, and it was written by 3 authors. I think they are from Piedmont: Antonio De Flumeri, Gianluca Montuschi, and Andrea Tavecchia. Initially, it was a self-published book. I bought it directly from them. Then they had it printed and distributed by a publisher, and now you can also find it on Amazon. Anyway, are we going to provide answers today? Absolutely not. We are not capable of that. We are just asking questions, and we'll see if someone can explain what we simply can't understand. Let me give 2 simple examples, which we will delve into later. Official Egyptology tells us that the pyramids are tombs, okay? But then why has no mummy ever been found inside them? Or another example, official Egyptology tells us that the Egyptians worked with tools made of copper, stone, and wood, yet we find artifacts, for example, in alabaster, that you could never work with copper. Well, how were they made then? I can already see some of you thinking that I want to suggest that aliens built the pyramids. If you thought that, it means you weren't paying attention. And if you can't manage to pay attention for 3 or 4 minutes, do yourself a favor. Turn off this video because I admit, to follow it, you need at least the attention span of a 10-year-old child. I said earlier that we won't provide answers. We will only ask questions. Answers are for the experts. Questions are for those who want to learn. I want to show this chart. It displays the construction volumes divided by the various reigning pharaohs from the 3rd to the 6th dynasty, separated for each individual pharaoh. And what immediately stands out, that during the 4th dynasty, more was built than in the entire history of Egypt. Now let's try grouping this chart by dynasty, not by pharaoh. Even in this chart, something seems strange. Previously, so little was built, and then so much. When we talk about the 4th dynasty, we refer to those rulers who supposedly built the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, all constructed in a single dynasty as never before. How did they do it? Were they so skilled and fast only during that time? For the earlier period, I can understand. Some construction techniques were unknown, so progress was slow initially. But afterwards, why couldn't the succeeding dynasties emulate the previous architects? Once you know a certain technology, you should be able to continue using it. And note that the 4th dynasty lasted only 90 years. Another aspect is construction capability. If we look at this aspect, we realize that not only did the 4th dynasty build more, they also built much better. For example, if we look at this image showing the pyramids built in various dynasties, it's evident to the naked eye that the preceding and subsequent dynasties didn't have the same capabilities. What happened during the 4th dynasty? And even more interestingly, what happened afterward? Now let's change the topic. As I said at the beginning, what are the pyramids? I asked this question to some of my friends, and almost all of them answered very clearly. Tombs. But if they are tombs, how many bodies do you think have been found in about 100 known pyramids? The answer is very simple: none. Not only that, but no treasures have ever been found either. You all know that the Egyptians buried the body of a person along with all the objects dear to the deceased. Nothing has ever been found. Some have told me, wait, what about Tutankhamun? His body was found, and there was also one of the most important treasures in history. Very true, but Tutankhamun was not found in a pyramid. His tomb was underground, and he lived 1,200 years later. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings, which is about 800 kilometers away from where the major pyramids are located. If you ask official Egyptology, they will tell you that all the bodies and all the treasures that were in the pyramids have been looted over the centuries. All of them. In all 100 pyramids, not one was spared. And that's not true. Let me give an example. Pharaoh Djoser of the Third Dynasty had a pyramid attributed to him. In this pyramid, it was only possible to enter in 1954, and what should have been the pharaoh's sarcophagus was found perfectly sealed. The original seals placed at the time of burial were still present and perfectly intact. Well, they opened the sarcophagus and found nothing inside. Mark Lehner is a renowned Egyptologist who, as part of a project called Project Nova, attempted to reconstruct a pyramid of only 9 meters in the Giza plateau, while the Great Pyramid of Khufu is 230 meters. In the official documentation of this project, it is stated that tools and technologies not available to the ancient Egyptians were used. They employed iron hammers, chisels, and levers, whereas the ancient Egyptians only had wood, stone, and copper. Project Nova even used flatbed trucks instead of the barges used by their predecessors. Furthermore, they used construction equipment like bulldozers to move and position the stones. The confined space still posed significant challenges for them. In 21 days, 12 men extracted 186 stones, but they did so, I repeat, with iron cables, with a crane, and with metal tools. The fact that using iron tools yields different results than using copper doesn't mean much. What I mean is, if you have to cut alabaster with copper, it's not like you can do it with 1,000 or 10,000 men. Alabaster just can't be worked with copper, at least not in the time in which that pyramid is said to have been built. The other interesting question is, how were they able to move these large blocks and assemble them at a height of 200 meters? Among many who attempted to answer this question was also the Egyptologist Georges Goyon, who died in 1996, hence our contemporary. His explanation is the one that is most commonly accepted today. If you watch any documentary on the construction of the pyramids, they will surely illustrate his theory, which is the famous theory of wrapping ramps. George Goyon made very precise calculations, taking into account the weight of the blocks, the slope of the ramp, and the pulling force of the men. And thus he concluded that to transport 41 tons of mass, which is the average weight of the blocks used, 1,061 men were needed. Now, if we go to verify these calculations, we find that there are several problems related to maneuverability, given that the space of the ramp is finite and limited, especially near the corners. Then there is the problem of the weight of the block, to which the weight of the men must naturally be added. The ramp was not made of the same material as the pyramids. They were poor materials, crude bricks, wooden mats, easy to build and also easy to remove. On page 77 of his book, The Secret of the Great Pyramids, Goyon writes that there were maneuvering difficulties for such a large number of people, with consequent problems of obstruction and weight bearing on the frame, so he acknowledges it too. And how does he explain it? We read on the same page of the book, "It is therefore decided to accept a minimum coefficient of friction or even to suppress it altogether." So Goyon, to make his calculations work, reduces or zeros the coefficient of friction of the stones. He says it, not me. By doing so, the number of men needed is reduced from 1,061 to 209. The calculations check out, but the trick is evident. Another question. If we assume that the pyramid is indeed a tomb of a single pharaoh, one wonders, why are there 3 chambers in the Great Pyramid? There is one below ground level, discovered by Strabo, one called the Queen's Chamber and one called the King's Chamber higher up. Please note, these names were not given because they found the bodies of the pharaoh or his wife inside. No bodies were found in there, just like in any other pyramid. It is called the Queen's Chamber because its sloping roof resembles the roofs of the tombs of Arab queens. Egyptology explains the presence of 3 chambers as being due to various changes in plans during construction. Essentially, the builders originally planned the first chamber below ground level, but for some reason they realized it was not suitable and decided to create another. However, for some reason this also did not work out, so they made the 3rd chamber, moving further upwards. The theory of changes in plans is applied to almost all pyramids, and from this, it is assumed that the builders who were skilled enough to erect monuments of this kind in almost all cases found themselves halfway through the work and were forced to change their plans. They were capable of aligning such a massive structure to the cardinal points with errors of hundredths of a degree. They could slope the walls very precisely, but they always made some mistake and yet completed the work, and this was done so well, despite these errors, that it still stands. Another interesting aspect concerns the construction time of the Great Pyramid. The data provided by Egyptologists are unanimous. They say the pyramid was built in 20 years. Let's consider 2 figures, 2,415,000 stones placed in 20 years. Let's pose a question. What path must each stone take to be put into place? First, it is extracted from quarries, then worked on, and shipped to Giza over a journey of approximately 800 kilometers. Then it is brought to the base of the pyramid, ascends the ramps, and is positioned with the precision we know. And how much time should be dedicated to each individual stone? If we take an average of 10 hours per stone, it means that laying 2,415,000 stones would require approximately 2,757 years. But let's do the reverse calculation. That is, how often should we lay a stone to build the pyramids in 20 years? The answer is 4 minutes and 21 seconds. That is, to meet a total construction time of 20 years, one would have to place a stone every 4.21 seconds, assuming, of course, continuous work around the clock. Ask a person working in a granite quarry if it's possible to extract material with the tools available to the ancient Egyptians. They will tell you it's a ludicrous idea. Now let's look at a real case, a case that actually happened. We are in the 1960s during the construction of the Aswan High Dam, where 2 temples at Abu Simbel had to be relocated to avoid being submerged by water. It was a crazy, titanic project that involved engineers and architects from around the world. Naturally, they used all the most modern machinery of the time to cut the 2 temples into blocks, weighing between 20 to 30 tons. It took them 3 years, and they moved 1,035 stone blocks. Using the same parameters as before, it means they had to dedicate about 25 hours to each block. Another fascinating topic concerns the Sphinx, which stands prominently on the Giza plateau. Who built it? Egyptologists argue that it was commissioned by Pharaoh Khafre. This belief is based on several facts. Firstly, there is a causeway that extends from Khafre's pyramid to the Sphinx. Secondly, between the Sphinx's paws, a stele known as the Dream Stele was found. On this stele, on the 13th line, there is a cartouche with the syllable Kaf. Cartouches typically contain the names of pharaohs, indicating in this case Pharaoh Khafre. This topic is still debated, as sources are extremely difficult to find. Another intriguing aspect is the dating of the Sphinx. There are scholars who propose to push back its origins. It's important to note that the Sphinx and pyramids cannot be dated using techniques like carbon-14, as this method is only effective for organic materials. However, upon examining the enclosure of the Sphinx, there are distinctive vertical erosions studied by a geologist named Robert Schkock from Boston University. These erosions are present on both the Sphinx enclosure and the Sphinx itself. Vertical erosion can only be caused by rainfall. Wind and sand, typical of desert climates, would create different types of erosion. It's highly unusual to find rain-induced erosion in such a desert environment. Thus, the researcher simply asked, what if there was a period in that region when the climate could produce such erosion? Schkock discovered that from around 8,000 to 4,500 BC, the climate in that area was humid with abundant rainfall. Geologically speaking, the construction of the Sphinx may need to be dated back approximately 2,000 years earlier than previously thought. This research has gained significant traction among geologists who largely support Schoch's findings. It raises the question of why this wasn't noticed earlier, given its visibility to all. Robert Schoch is regarded as a competent researcher by geological standards, but he has faced opposition from Egyptologists. He was even prohibited from returning to Giza to continue his studies. I'll stop here. I don't have answers to give. I've just raised questions because the official theory seems to have some obvious gaps. I'm ready to believe anything that has convincing evidence. Thank you for your attention, and always keep an open mind. Keep asking questions. It's through questions, even the most basic ones, that knowledge accumulates. There are no stupid questions. At worst, the answers can be foolish. If you're interested in further exploring these topics, I invite you to subscribe to the Beyond Science Italy channel to stay updated on our explorations and discussions.